Hi everyone. So I recently sent an email that perhaps might be quite too lengthy to read. So for some of you, you might be better off just watching this video instead. Here's what I wanted to convey. I was reading an article from the Harvard Business Review about how to market in a downturn. I've shared the link with you in that email. In that article that I read, it had such a positive impact on me and the survival of our careers in the age of COVID-19 that I had taken the liberty to translate it in a language that you and I, as PPAs, could get on board with and understand better. Here's how it goes. So, in every recession, sales professionals find themselves in poorly uncharted waters. And that's because no two downturns are exactly alike. However, in studying the marketing success and failures of dozens of companies as they've navigated recessions from the 1970s and onward, there were two authors from the Harvard Business Review who have identified patterns in consumer behaviors as well as companies and their strategies that help propel performance. We, as pre planning advisors, need to understand the evolving consumption and fine tune our strategies accordingly to our client families as we learn to prospect and survive in the age of COVID 19. During recessions, of course, consumers set stricter priorities and reduce their spending. Consequently, sales will start to drop. Businesses then will typically cut costs and postpone new investments. For example, at this time, we're not hiring more PPAs within the Seattle market temporarily. Now, as expenditures could get re examined and expenditures could get cut within the company, I know that our corporate leaders are making the best decisions to protect every current set of employees who are part of the SEI family, as well as all of our existing and future client families. Now, you too have a very important role to play in protecting your existing client families and your future client families. So, as part of your calls and emails, I strongly encourage you to make an effort to contact your families who you have sold to recently and reinforce the importance of keeping their pre need investments at these uncertain times where they too may be looking to cut costs. While the economy remains uncertain, unfortunately, their mortality and possibility of dying, perhaps tomorrow even, remains constantly at 100%. So we as PPAs, we depend on our client families having disposable income and feeling confident about their future, trusting in our mission, the economy that they're accustomed to, and embracing lifestyles and values that encourage pre planning, especially for their funeral needs, cremation needs, and cemetery needs. But for better or for worse, we know that death for each and every one of us remains a constant in our futures, COVID 19 or not. In the economic downturn, this economic downturn rather, has caused a chain of reactions from the outbreak of COVID 19, and it's certainly driving our client families to adjust their behaviors in fundamental ways and perhaps in even ways that are either temporary or permanent. During these uncertain times, consumers, including our client families, face piles of bills, stagnant or falling incomes, and for some, even a shrinking nest egg. Despite all of this, their chances of one day needing funeral, cremation, and/or cemetery services remain a constant. So, these combined effects suggest a challenge for us as PPAs, not only during the downturn, but in the recovery that will eventually follow. For one, our target markets may need to be shifted. Two, our current clients may find themselves considering to cancel their current investments, and I hope not. However, we stand a very good chance in surviving these uncertain times, though. Once again, reaching out to your existing client families not only allow you to get a chance of receiving referrals, it also allows you a chance to reinforce the importance of their pre-need investments. The first step in responding must be to understand new consumer segments. So, there are new consumer segments that emerge within a recession, according to the article that I read, rather. Now, marketers will typically segment according to some demographics like over 40 or say new parents or middle income. Those are some examples. There are other categories as well. But these kinds of segmentations could be irrelevant during a time of a downturn, and psychological segmentation could be more relevant. So, psychological segmentation definitely takes into effect when considerations for consumers' emotional reactions to the economic environment are reevaluated. According to the article that I read, you want to think of your potential client families falling into four groups. So first, we've got the slam on the brakes segment. Second, we've got the pain but patient segment. Third, we've got the comfortably well off segment. And fourth, we've got the live for today segment. So segment one, these are your slam on the brakes segment. They are the ones who feel most vulnerable and hardest hit financially. Perhaps they're the ones who may have lost much of their income due to the domino effects of the COVID-19 outbreak. This group, they reduce all types of spending by eliminating, postponing, decreasing, or substituting purchases. Now, although your lower income consumers, your lower income client families typically fall into this segment, some of your anxious higher income consumers can fall into the same segment as well, especially if health or income circumstances could change for the worse. Now, within your anxious higher income client families, they may want to postpone their plans for their private estates or full casket burial plans and grand catering needs. However, this may be the time to offer them to substitute instead with a simple tribute funeral package or a double dep lawn crypts to help cut costs. Or perhaps this may be even the time for them to consider cremation. They can always change these prearrangements as they later choose. When it comes to planning ahead, most of our client families are going to be better off planning for something at minimum as opposed to not planning for anything at all. They can choose to postpone major purchases, but no, they may not postpone the possibility of death tomorrow. The second segment is segment two, the pain but patient segment. The pain but patient consumers, they tend to be resilient and optimistic about the long term, but less confident about the prospects for recovery in the near term, or especially their ability to maintain their standards of living. So, kind of like the slam on the brakes consumers, they economize on all areas, though less aggressively. They also represent the largest segment and include a great majority of households unscathed by unemployment, and they also represent a wide range of income levels. Now, as news gets worse, pain but patient consumers increasingly migrate into the slam on the brakes segment, and I can infer that we have a better opportunity among the pain but patient consumers, as they are the ones who hold on to hope. While they may see the need to minimize indulgent costs, such as the things that they want, they see the value in investing in the things that they need. Our role is to remind them of the need that we fulfill and the need that their loved ones, perhaps who now belong to the slam on the brakes segment, need to be protected from. The third segment are the comfortably well off. These comfortably well off consumers feel secure about their ability to ride out the current and future bumps in the economy. They also consume at near pre-recession levels, so nothing's changed perhaps for them. Although now they tend to be a little more selective and less conspicuous about their purchases. So in this particular group of people, they consist primarily of people who are in the top 5% income bracket, and I know that they exist among your Salesforce funnels. Just filter your searches to the zip codes that we know are among the wealthiest of wealthy neighborhoods in the United States. It also includes those who are less wealthy but feel confident about the stability of their finances. The comfortably retired, for example, or investors who got out of the market early, or they had money in low risk investments such as CDs. I want to point out one part of this segment, especially the comfortably retired, especially the recently retired. This is the time to be reaching out to them, as they too are your best prospects to protect via the full benefit prearranged funerals. This is the best protection we have to offer. The last segment are the Live for Todays. The Live for Today segment carries on as usual and for the most part remains unconcerned about savings. The consumers in this group, they respond to the recession mainly by extending their timetables for making major purposes. Now, I caution you to handle your client families who may fall under this segment with closer fiduciary care. While they may be interested in spending more than what you had internally pre-qualified them for, they would be the type of client families you may need to ask the same questions in 3 different ways, whether or not they truly wish to afford what it is they're choosing to purchase from you. Otherwise, they may endanger themselves experiencing a cancellation in the future. Moreover, they're unlikely to change their consumption behavior unless they become unemployed. Now, regardless of which group of consumers your client families belong to, your client families will prioritize consumption by sorting products and services into 4 different categories. A, We've got the essentials, things that are necessary for survival or perceived as central to their own well being. B, you've got treats. These are indulgences whose immediate purchase is considered justifiable. C, we've got postponables. These are things that are needed or desired items whose purchases can be reasonably postponed later. And then lastly, D, we've got the expendables, and these items are perceived to be unnecessary or unjustifiable. All consumers consider basic levels of food, shelter, and clothing to be essentials, and most would put transportation and medical care within that category as well. Beyond that, though, it still remains that only 3 out of 10 Americans plan for some or all of their funeral, cremation, and or cemetery needs. This is because most of our client families see pre-need as postponable, unfortunately. We know that most people find themselves searching for pre-need information when they realize how essential it is, as someone is close to passing away, for example. Most of them only consider for themselves or consider planning for themselves once they experience a death within their circle. As you know, far too many people take far too many things for granted in life, and that's exactly what we all have learned during this COVID outbreak. Now, throughout this time of uncertainty, all consumers except those who are in the Live for Today segment typically reevaluate their consumption priorities. We know from previous recessions that such products and services like restaurant dining, travel and entertainment, new clothing, cars, appliances, and consumer electronics can quickly shift into consumers' minds from essential treats, postponables, or even expendables, depending on the individual. As we speak, we know that restaurant and travel expenses definitely are minimized or postponed. As priorities change, however, consumers may altogether eliminate purchases in certain categories such as household services, cleaning, lawn care, or snow removal, moving them from essentials, say, to expendables. Or maybe they would also substitute purchases in one category for purchases in another, perhaps by swapping out dining, which would be a treat, for cooking at home, which is now an essential. They may even shift their expenses to perceived essentials, such as toilet paper. It's important to keep in mind that the investment in prearranged funerals, cremations, and or cemetery needs can qualify for many as both essential or perceived essentials. Because of this, we have a good standing chance of succeeding in our careers in spite of all that's happening around us. Some people continue to pre-need as they see this as an essential purchase. Our client families are beginning to look into pre-need as a perceived essential due to the alarming impacts of the COVID-19 outbreak. And here's how you can manage investing your time when it comes to prospecting. During recessions, it's more important than ever to remember that loyal customers are the primary and enduring source of cash flow and organic growth for most businesses. For you, though, as pre-planning advisors, your existing customers, your client families, are also the ones that are very thankful that they have these pre-needs in place. They're also the ones who are now, more than ever, advocated to you and your mission for protecting families. In short, they're going to be your best resources for new business, as in referrals, during this uncertain time. Prospecting, you have to know that it's not optional. Let me repeat that. Prospecting is not optional. You have the advantage in today's economic climate of remaining employed and that your hours are not cut back. However, if we define the definition of employment as having financial gains in exchange for your time and efforts in working, your employment status then depends on you. And that's not dependent on us within management. This means that every day that you have an appointment, you remain employed. Furthermore, every hour that you conduct activity towards prospective sales, you remain clocked in. It's important that you keep conducting activity to generate prospective sales. If at the time before the COVID outbreak it took 33 phone calls to book one appointment on average, what do you think it is now? It may take more now that many have moved themselves away from your target market, but at the same time, many people are now staying home available to pick up your call. My point is, as you manage your time and exercise what I call choice management instead of time management, the day that you don't have an appointment, you may very well be unemployed. And the minute that you stop calling, you've clocked out from work. Your strategic opportunities during this time will depend strongly on how well you identify your client families within those 4 segments, and most especially how well you prospect and how much time you prospect. And More importantly than that, your success will also depend on how you guide your client families to categorize pre-need as a set of products and services. Whether business opportunities are uncertain or declining, now is the time to part from habits that have success, prohibited you from what your success would have been before the COVID-19 outbreak. And if your sales and your board volumes start to decline, don't panic, don't panic. You as a pre-planning advisor were never short of clients to begin with. You may have been short in time or opportunities to reach out to them, or perhaps you may have been short of the inspiration to connecting with your existing opportunities. But the amount of opportunities in your funnel is certainly the one thing you're just not short of. So how do you prospect in the time of COVID-19? You start by knowing that while you're possibly at home reading or listening to this message, so are your client families and their cell phones. Let that sink in. Your clients and their cell phones may very well be home right now. This means that you have the opportunity to reach them. They too have opportunities to protect their families from the worst days of their lives. They just don't realize it yet. Perhaps you hadn't connected with them in a while to remind them. During this time, it's important that you balance your efforts from 3 things now to 4 things. Not only do you have to prospect, present, and protect, you also have to prevent. You want to prevent your families from canceling by reconnecting with them. You want to prevent your families and their circles from forgetting that prearranging their funeral, cremation, and cemetery needs are emotionally and financially essential. Let them know that despite social distancing, we have platforms that allow them to protect their families and making their selections from the safety of their own home. Reassure them that we can cater to their needs in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, and even also after all of this settles, and even if we approach a new kind of normal. For better or for worse in this economic crisis, we will not be faced with a declining demand. That's just not the nature of our business, unfortunately. Moreover, not only has SCI streamlined our product and service offerings, we've also invested in much innovation just in the nick of time through Salesforce, Beacon, and WebEx. Lastly, and fortunately for you, you also have a talented and devoted set of managers that are available for you if you need them. Now, here are your strategies to improve your prospecting in the age of COVID. So there are 3 strategies here. First, be intentional with your incentives. Second, bolster trust. Third, position yourself for recovery. Here's what I mean. First, you got to be intentional with your incentives and discounts. We all differ in our discounting philosophies, but one thing we share in common is the fact that our discounts are a negotiation tool. You've got to be brave to trust the Kool-Aid and commit to the conversation and allowing the conversation to show your client families what sets us apart from competition. In doing so, you're guiding your client families to understand and embrace that locking in costs partnered with our dignity difference offerings are our best discounts that we have to offer. I just sold 2 full benefit packages virtually a la carte. And virtually, let me say that again, meaning I could not provide the dignity difference discount, or excuse me, not the dignity difference discount, the dignity discount that are part of a package because it's a la carte. So again, no discounts already part of it. I didn't give any additional discounts. I sold them catering, the family support option, a decent casket, the MAM, all tailored to their freedom of choice and their needs. Not their wants, but their needs. In the end, they even asked me for permission to share my contact information to their friends. Now, what you should realize from what I'm trying to say is that most of our products and services revolve around the needs of our client families. They just need guidance to see how the need applies. Based on this example, my client families understood the need and they saw the opportunity in locking in prices. They also saw the value in our dignity difference offerings. In other words, by using the conversation, because I literally had the script in front of me without the client knowing, since we can do that with virtual presentations now, it demonstrated Aristotle's mode of persuasion, the value of the message, the credibility of the speaker, and the emotions that are invoked among the audience. So the opportunity to save money by locking in prices and the dignity difference became very paramount to my client families that I served virtually. Suddenly, this $12,000 package was more than the ticketed price. So be intentional with your incentives. I used my discounts to close on the cemetery side, and it worked, even if it was virtual. Second, you gotta bolster their trust in us. Your client families are so worried right now. For many of them, pre need isn't even among the things that they're worrying about at this moment, even though it should be. However, market data shows that a culture of panic buying, unfortunately, for pre need is beginning to ensue. It's kind of too bad that it took a pandemic to open their eyes, but what else is new? For most of our pre need clients, it takes a death within the family for within their circle for them to realize the value of planning ahead. What you need to reinforce is their trust in our company. Did you know that we were among the first responders during the 9/11 crisis? Today, we even remain as first responders to the COVID-19 pandemic. We as SCI have also stayed true to our mission and purpose, unlike some other funeral home establishments across the globe, such as, unfortunately, some in the Philippines who have exercised their rights to decline their services to others, mainly families of COVID-19 decedents. It even took a presidential decree to outlaw such a heartbreaking business practice during this time. So reassure your client families that that's not who we are. We are a 100% service guarantee company who will bring their loved ones back from dying abroad by working with the same responders who bring our fallen soldiers back home. Ease their worry. Ease their worry by telling them our story and reassure them by making an effort to be part of their story. Here's what I mean by that. What I mean by that is we must remind our client families that we will all get through this uncertain time together. And if these uncertain times mean that their family members will have to experience loss, then they wouldn't have to face the emotional and financial burdens alone, as prearrangements would have been in place and available to protect them. This is how we become part of their stories, and this is how we become part of the together. So while it's important to build emotional connections with your client families, don't neglect to reinforce trust by reminding your client families that buying into the Dignity Memorial brand is a very sound decision. So again, bolster their trust in you, bolster their trust in us. Third and most important of all, you've got to set yourself up for recovery. The most important thing you can do for yourself, your families, your client families, and the company is to position yourself for recovery. Survivors make it through uncertain times by focusing their attention on consumer needs. However, as PPAs, we all must understand how people's behavior may change following these unprecedented times. So you'll be able to offer products and communicate messages that are aligned with the needs of the new consumer segments amid the COVID-19 outbreak. This can be accomplished by doing everything that we've discussed so far. Survivors also make it through by planting seeds. Seeds that would one day grow to sustain the continuity of your business. As you reach out to as many people as you possibly can, we know that not all of them will be inspired to take action now. So don't lose hope. Don't lose hope on them as they are counting on you not to. If you fail to do this, if you lose hope on them, the worst consequence is when they come across a time of need and then they blame you for not pushing them enough. Don't let that happen to you, and don't let that happen to any one of your client families. More importantly, don't let that happen to them in the time of COVID. When the times begin to be more certain, hopefully in the near future, things could return to normal. And when that happens, all the seeds that you would have planted that grew could now be harvested. By that time, many people will come to terms with everything that we as a global society had taken for granted, that consequentially brought us to where we are today. By reminding them not to take things for granted, your prospects will come to understand the value of your proposition much, much more profoundly. So, pre-planning advisors should prepare now for a possible long-term shift, maybe, in consumer behavior and attitudes that may very well be for the better. The only way to prepare for this is to shift your own behaviors and your own attitudes. So, prospect a little more, present more intentionally, and protect more purposefully. In doing this, you'll generate a following of people who would be your advocates to why people must plan ahead, and why people must plan ahead to protect the ones that they love the most. Friends, if you do this, you'll save yourselves, your careers, and save those who you financially support. Most importantly, you'll be able to make a difference and save a community that needs you most. We know that it's already too late for the 7 out of 10 people who walk through our doors, as only 3 out of 10 plan ahead for some of their funeral, cremation, and cemetery needs. So you now have to do your part to move the needle and make a difference. Make a difference, be the change. during these uncertain times, there are three things that are certain. One is that death is a constant. Two is that you still have a job. And three is that you have a duty to fulfill. So I hope that you succeed, and I hope that you find this time now to fulfill the duties that you're called for. And I hope to see your success in April, and I hope that April will be the month that you'll make the biggest difference for your community. So I hope that you were able to listen and watch this entire video, and I hope that somehow this had inspired you to see that there is still light at the end of the tunnel, that things can get better, that even though times are uncertain, that you still have a chance to succeed in your role as a pre-planning advisor. Thanks for listening.